Hello, this is Sam from the past, from January. Are things different? How's the world? Is everything good? I hope everything's fine. And this is my spoiler-free review of Wicked Saints by Emily Duncan. So obviously, since I'm filming this in January, I got an advanced reader copy of this book. This is a debut YA fantasy, the first book in a trilogy. And this takes place in a fantasy world that's inspired by Eastern European folklore and mythology and culture, so it's mostly Polish and Russian in this book. And this follows two different perspectives. One is of Nadia, and she is the last cleric in her country, meaning that she is imbued with divinity and has the gods that she can speak to, and she's one of the only clerics known that can speak to all of these gods. Usually a cleric can only speak to one, so she has all of the gods basically on her side that allow her to do magic. And then we have Seraphin, and he is the crown prince of the country that Nadia's country has been at war with for many years. And he is a very accomplished blood mage, and to Nadia's people, blood mages are heretics, and to his people, the gods are false. And anyway, he is on a mission to basically hunt her down. And at the very beginning of the story, their paths kind of collide, and everything kind of goes from there. So that synopsis was surprisingly hard, because the thing about this book is that it's not so much about the plot or any of that, it's more about the aesthetic. So with that, let me get into the world building. Let me just say right now, trigger warning for blood. And if you don't like blood, do not read this book if you don't like blood. For gore, for torture, and for self-harm, anything like that, if you can't deal with blood, you can't read this. There is so much blood, but in a way, like, blood doesn't bother me, and the whole aesthetics of, like, goth blood, like, that's fine for me. This is blood fantasy. There's blood, and there's a lot of, like, eldritchness, and it is an aesthetic that I found very enjoyable. It's why I wore black lipstick for this video. There's also these two conflicting religions. So you have Nadia's kind of religion with all of her gods, but then you have Seraphin's sort of religion and the blood magic thing and all of that kind of conflicting. And I really like when you have worlds that have these conflicting religions, or that have these religions that may not be all that they seem, and that's what these religions really are, or really Nadia's, because Seraphin doesn't have, it's a little different. Blood magic. It's bad. Next, let me get to the characters. I really enjoyed Nadia as a character. She is stubborn, she has a temper. I enjoyed her, and I kind of knew I was going to enjoy her going in. And Seraphin is a character that actually grew on me. I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about him from the beginning, but since he is a POV character, but he's also kind of set up as an antagonist because of these two kind of opposing countries, then I really liked Nadia from the beginning, and Seraphin I wasn't sure about, but he quickly grew on me. He's sort of this loyal nerd, and that's the thing about this series, and you don't really know, like, who necessarily you're rooting for, and everyone's kind of an antagonist to everyone else, and it really is kind of like, who is the villain and who should you be rooting for and what's kind of going on. I will say that I feel like there are a number of side characters, but they didn't feel fleshed out enough for me. The main three characters, two of the POV and then one side character I'll talk about in a second, they are fleshed out the most, but some of the side characters I found pretty interesting, but we didn't really get enough from them. They did not feel real to me. They do not feel like characters that are existing outside of this world when we're not reading about them. They just feel like sort of a backdrop for what the main three are doing. So the other character I want to talk about is Malakiash, whose name I am not probably pronouncing right, but I looked at the pronunciation guide before talking about this. I have seen this character's name for literal years because I've been following Emily Duncan online for years as she's been writing this book. So that's a twist that I bring to this and my background as far as this book. So it's hard for me to say his name out loud because I've been saying it wrong in my head for years. But he is the main love interest in this story, and this book has been advertised as a villain romance. So I knew going in that he was this villainous antagonist character. The synopsis basically says it, all of the marketing for it says it, and I think everyone should know that this is a villain type romance, just so if you're not into that, you don't read it. But with all that being said, I had expectations for this romance, and it wasn't as slow burn, angsty, and conflicted as I thought it was going to be, which ultimately left me pretty disappointed. There's a lot of telling and not showing as far as the character's feelings about the romance. So Nadia is obviously supposed to be conflicted about it, and she says she is in her POV, but you're like, I don't really believe you. I don't really believe you. So ultimately when I read villain, main character, love interest things, I had expectations. And I don't feel like they were quite met by this, because I had more expectations for angst and for a more drawn out situation where the characters were feeling really conflicted, and I just don't feel like that happened with this story for me. There's also a lot of details that are told in the different perspectives, where the character whose perspective you are in will say something about one of the other characters that they really shouldn't know. So they will say something about how that character is like feeling based on how they're looking, and it's like, that's not something that the character should necessarily know. I also found there's a lot of trust built way too quickly between characters, especially because a lot of the characters that are interacting throughout the story, whether they're side characters or main characters, are on opposing sides. So I felt like the trust between characters happened a little bit too quickly, and I wasn't feeling the passage of time. If they were together a little bit longer, I wasn't feeling that to where I felt like the trust level that was forming was that believable that quickly. Next, I'm going to talk about the plot. There were some pacing issues with this, I felt. So the beginning felt a little slow to me, and I feel like the end wrapped up really, really quickly. I still was engaged throughout the story, but I just felt like the pacing was off for me personally. I also felt confused at times about some things. Like, there were multiple points in the story where I felt like I was missing something, particularly at the end, where like a character would say something and then there would just be skipping to action, and I'm like, did I miss a chunk of conversation? Why is the character doing this? Have they explained it to the other character? What is happening? And that happened a few times throughout the story. And I'm not someone who's very easily confused by books, so I'm not sure what was happening that I was confused by this. It wasn't the writing style, because the writing is not overly flowery or anything, even though it is very like aesthetically driven. It's not overly flowery to where I'm confused about what's going on. I just felt like there were chunks missing for me. And while there were chunks missing in some parts, I feel like other things we got really beat over the head with. For example, when there's monstrosity, or the love interest monstrosity is just like beat over the head. Like, it's said so much and described so much, and it's just like, we get it. We get it. They're monsters. He's monstrous. We get it. Also, Nadia's like divinity and attachment to the divinity and the fact that she's holy. It's like, we get it. She's holy. We understand. So ultimately, some of these missteps caused me to be a little more disappointed than I thought I was going to be in this book. I went into this book really expecting it to be a 4 to 5 star read for me, and the fact that it didn't quite hit that mark for me was really disappointing, which is why I sat with this review for a little while. I took some notes right after reading it. I was thinking about filming my review then, but I think that would have come across as me not liking the book because I was so disappointed right after reading it. But after sitting with it, I'm still disappointed. It still didn't live up quite to my expectations, but I don't think this is a bad book. I don't think this is a book that people shouldn't read. I do feel like there was some hype that I instilled on myself because I wasn't really listening to what people were saying. Not a ton of people have read this yet, but I've followed this book for so long that I like overhyped it myself and had expectations myself that I really couldn't have avoided with this. So I was disappointed right after reading it, and I think it would have come off, my review would have come off more ranty if I would have reviewed it right after reading it. It's not a rant-worthy book. It's just a book that I consider more of a neutral book for me. I end up giving this 3.75 stars. It's a little above a halfway mark, but not quite a 4-star, not quite good enough for me there. I think the rest of the series will continue to improve. I think there's a lot of things that are going to get fleshed out and a lot of things I will ultimately enjoy, but this definitely set a foundation like most first books do, and I'm interested to see how we build on this. I still really enjoy the aesthetics of this, how dark it is, and the whole villain main character dynamic, how that's going to develop as the series goes on, because now I know what to expect from it, that I feel like the rest of the series I will enjoy more because I know what this series is going to give me more so now. So I am going to do a spoilery discussion on this book because I don't think I can necessarily call it a gush or a gripe, really. So if you've read this book and you're interested in my thoughts, I will link that on the screen. So comment down below, let me know what you thought of Wicked Saints. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see all of you guys soon. Bye.